What is up, guys? My name is Matt from Magic the Greatening, and today I got a deck that a lot of you wanted in my last video. You guys voted for it. It's Blue-Red Locust. I'm making a deck for every god, and the Locust God is probably the most popular one. A lot of people like the blue-red is-it archetype type of thing, and the Locust God fits it very, very well. So before we get into it, go ahead, hit that like button, only if you enjoy the video. Subscribe if you are new to my channel, and go ahead and vote for next video's deck tech. Top right corner, 5 choices this time. I tried to do 8 in my last video, but it only allows up to 5. A lot of old choices still there, but there'll be one brand new one to fill in the Locust God slot. Go ahead and vote for which one you want to see next. Now let's get into it. You guys know I like starting out with the creatures, and we're only playing 3 creatures in this deck, and it's 3 whole copies of the Locust God. So this card is about $20 for the 3 copies as of right now. When I'm recording this, it's 3 days from release of Hour Devastation, but when I actually edit and put this video out, it'll be 2 days from Hour Devastation release. Not pre-release, but the official release. So Locust God right now, pre-order price is around $20. Once it stops seeing, people realize it's not going to see a lot of standard play, the price will go down. But I think the price will still stay up, especially since it's a god. So 3 copies of that. And this card, this is what the deck is built around, is a 6-mana 4/4 flyer, which is eh. It says whenever you draw a card, create a 1/1 blue and red insect creature token with flying and haste. That haste part is super, super, super important in this deck, so keep that in mind. His activated ability is pay 4, which is 2 blue and a red, draw a card, then discard a card, which is eh. It's not the greatest activated ability, and it has this God Cycle ability when it says when it dies, return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step, which is kind of good because if someone late claims it or confiscation coups it, it dies, it'll come back to your hand at end step, so do keep that in mind. Let's get into the non-creature spells now. Let's start at the bottom of the curve for the non-creature spells and move our way up. Stay organized here. We're going to play 2 copies of Shock, 3 copies of Essence Scatter, and 4 copies of Cathartic Reunion. Shock is, I think, the only technical burn card in the deck. We are playing Sweltering Suns in the main board, which is one of the more expensive cards in the deck. But Shock is just a 2 of. There's a lot more burn in the sideboard, don't worry about that. Essence Scatter, I'm actually playing only 3. I'm playing 3 Essence Scatter and no negates in the deck. Our worst enemy really is having creatures resolve, having them have a huge board, and just flooding us before we can get a Locust God out. So Essence Scatter is in there just to keep important creatures off the board. And then Cathartic Reunion, can cycle out some of your cards. You have a bad hand. You need more lands. You need more action in your hand. You only have lands. You discard some bad cards, you redraw 3 fresh cards, pretty strong card. Not only can it do that, but it's a 2-mana basically draw 3. You had to discard 2, but draw 3 cards, which is good for a Locust God because it'll create 3 1/1 flying haste guys. At sorcery speed, which is the downfall, but it is basically a 2-mana create 3 1/1 flying haste guys with the Locust God out. So Cathartic Reunion gets a ton of value in this deck. Alright, let's move on up the curve to our 3-mana spells here. We're going to be playing 3 copies of Void Shatter, 3 copies of Sweltering Suns, and 4 copies of Collective Defiance. Void Shatter is just a hard counter spell for 3 mana that exiles something, which is kind of important in the standard. There's a lot of graveyard stuff going on here. There's a lot of desert cards that have to do with things like in the graveyard. There's still Delirium in standard. There's just a whole bunch of graveyard stuff, like Scrap Heap Scrounger, Dread Wanderer. It's kind of a waste to waste a Void Shatter on one of those guys, but you can if you want. Tragic Lessons is really strong, and the only reason I'm playing it in this deck is because it's at instant speed, and you draw 2 cards. So at instant speed, for 3 mana, you draw 2 cards, and then you have to discard a card unless you return a land to your hand. So if you have a whole bunch of lands out, you don't really care about losing a land or getting a turn back with a land. You don't have to discard, but if you have a really bad card in your hand, like you have a whole bunch of lands, then go ahead and discard a land. You don't really need to return another one. So in that sense, it's really good. At instant speed, with the Locust God out, it's a 3 mana, put 2 1/1 flyers out and draw 2 cards. Pretty good. And then Collective Defiance is probably one of the strongest cards in the deck. I played it in my blue-red, I guess I call it Prowess, Instants, and Sorceries in the Grave, where you play things like Enigma Drake and things like that. But Collective Defiance is so versatile and very strong in this deck. There's only 2 modes you really were going to use it for, which is target player discards all the cards in his hand, then draws that many cards, which is super strong. Sometimes it'll draw you 3-4 cards, which is really good, especially with the Locust God out. Also can just cycle out your hand. And then the other mode is you pay 1 more, or you don't escalate at all, and you just choose this mode, deal 4 damage to target creature. Those are the 2 modes you're going to use most of the time. If they have 3 life left, you can go ahead and use Collective Defiance for that, but basically those first 2 modes are pretty good, and the versatility of this card is just super key. One of the best cards in the deck, and one of the more cheaper quote-unquote best cards in the deck. Alright, let's move on to the final cards we are playing in the deck. Are 4 or 5 mana, and we're also playing Pull from Tomorrow, but 2 copies of Pull from Tomorrow, 4 copies of Hieroglyphic Illumination, and 2 copies of Brawl's Expertise. Alright, so Pull from Tomorrow is kind of a no-brainer in this deck. I only wanted to play the 2 of, don't want it in our hands at the beginning. It's good to draw into late, you have a whole bunch of mana. On your main phase, pre-combat main phase, you just do a Pull from Tomorrow for like 8, and you just get 8 1/1 flyers and you swing in for a lot. Pretty much a game ender right there. I don't think I need to defend playing Pull from Tomorrow in this deck. 4 Hieroglyphic Illumination. We don't really need Glimmer of Genius. I prefer this card over Glimmer of Genius in this deck. A, because it can cycle itself out for 1 mana, which 1 mana draw card, pretty good. But if you want to, you can pay 4 at instant speed and draw 2 cards, which is decent. It's not Tragic Lesson. I think in a better sense is like actually better. But Hieroglyphic Illumination, you can cycle out for 1 mana. And then 2 copies of Brawl's Expertise. I have a ton of people always in my comments saying, why are you playing Brawl's Expertise over Engulf the Shore? And in most cases, especially in a deck that wants to get to the late game, I would play Engulf the Shore 10 times out of 9 over this card, except for the fact Engulf the Shore is one of the worst draws you can get after you play a Locust God, because you get rid of all your 1/1 flyers and you have to put them back out. I'd just rather have a Brawl's Expertise. We have enough burn and counter spells in the deck to keep ourselves alive until we get a Locust God out. We have a ton of stuff in the sideboard for aggro, so Brawl's Expertise is a 2 of, because it can just be a one-sided bounce spell, and we can play something for 4 mana. Like, we can play a Collective Defiance off it, we can play a Hieroglyphic Illumination off it, we can play a Tragic Lesson, you know, all this kind of stuff off of Brawl's Expertise. Unfortunately, I can't play a Locust God off it. That'd be pretty sweet. But we'll take what we can get. Playing 2 copies of this, just Engulf the Shore just felt so bad after you had a Locust God out. Alright, that is all the cards, or non-land cards, in the main board. We're playing 26 lands in the deck. Now, if you have the Wandering Fumarole and the Spiral Bluff Canal, go ahead and throw them in here. You probably would already if you had the land base. But if you don't have them and you don't want to go spend the money on those lands, here's the land base I used when testing this thing out. 4 Highland Lakes, which is just a dual land from Amonkhet, and then 11 Island and 11 Mountain. The problem with this deck is there's a lot of double blue and a lot of double red. You have things like Sweltering Suns, Collective Defiance, Brawl's Expertise, Pull from Tomorrow, Void Shatter, and then the Locust God is a blue and a red. It shouldn't be that hard when you have 6 lands out to have a blue and a red. A lot of early game stuff that need both colored mana. Thankfully, there's a lot of like drawing cards, discarding cards, getting rid of bad cards in our hand in this deck. So you shouldn't have too much of a problem once you get going finding the right cards you need. And that's another thing. In any other instance, I would probably play 4 copies of Locust God in the deck since it's built around it. But we're drawing so many cards with the deck. We're cycling out a whole bunch. Hitting a Locust God, we only need to hit it once in a game. If you have 2 copies of it in your hand and you play one, it's just a dead card. I mean, you can always discard it out, so that's pretty nice too. So yeah, that is the land base. Let's move to the sideboard. Sideboard time. And there's 3 decks you really got to worry about when you're using this deck. Aggro, other control matchups, a lot of control going around right now, and combo decks. And those are usually the big main 3 in Magic. So we have a plan against all that here in our sideboard. We have things like Dispel, Negate, and an extra copy of Void Shatter. 4 Dispel, 3 Negate, 1 extra Void Shatter. in the sideboard here to take on our control matchups and our combo-based matchups. Dispel is probably one of the better cards for control, because if you play a huge void, or not a huge void shed, or a huge pull from tomorrow, you can just leave a mana up for a Dispel if they have like a negate or a disallow or something like that. So Dispel in that sense is good. Negate also very good against control matchups. They try to play Planeswalkers, anything like that. Also, Negate's very strong against combo decks. A lot of the combo decks have to do with like artifacts or Planeswalkers or like the Water Veil, or Nissa's Renewal, all that kind of big type of sorcery and instant speed stuff. Artifacts. Negate can handle that. An extra copy of Void Shatter, just to throw it in against extra combo decks, so you can have those. You have good 7 hard counters for combo decks. Against aggro, we're playing 4 copies of Incendiary Flow, 2 copies of Magma Spray, and 1 extra copy of Sweltering Suns in the sideboard. Incendiary Flow can get rid of things like Lord of the Accursed, buffed up zombies, like a buffed up Relentless Dead. Incendiary Flow is good against. Magma Spray can help shock out against the zombie aggro matchup, kind of those two. Just by exiling things, get rid of Scrap Heap, get rid of Dread Wanderer for good. Get rid of those occurring threats for good. Magma Spray is good against that. 1 extra Sweltering Suns, just because it can be very strong against aggro decks. If you have 4 in the main board, it's really hard not to get rid of an entire board of tokens or something with Sweltering Suns. And it's always good because you can cycle it out and draw a card for Locust God. So that is also another use for Sweltering Suns. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this deck tech. A super, super fun deck tech. I know it just seems like blue-red control, but really all it takes is 1 or 2 turns with a Locust God out and you win the game. The haste on the Flyers is so strong. It's pretty insane. Without haste, I think the deck is pretty good, but with haste, just a huge pull from tomorrow pre-combat main phase just straight up wins you the game. Or you string together a Cathartic Reunion with a Tragic Lesson with a Hieroglyphic Illumination. You just drew 8 or 9 cards, and then you start cycling stuff out. It is just so strong with this deck. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Go ahead and vote for next video's deck tech. Top right corner, 5 choices. Select the one you want to see the most. And I will see you in the next video. Peace.